Alright, I wasn't going to make a video about this camera, but I decided I'm going to do maybe parts working on it here and there, because it's still got some good information if you're working on the Sony RX100 M5. So I got this little cable off, and this little thing here, the eye viewer, what's it called thing, has 3 little screws. And let's see, there's one right here, and there's one in this little slot here, and where was the other one? There's one there, and one over here that you got to get. Let's see, it's behind here, right here. So 1, 2, 3, those little screws there, and then you have to unsolder. And I'm using my little welder. It's a pretty neat little welding gun. I had this for a long time, and it's really been working good. Used to take batteries, but I put a cord on it because putting batteries in it all the time just got kind of... But this thing, I've never changed a tip on it, and it just works and works and works, and it's great for small jobs like this. So these little speaker cables, they solder right here. And this side, the left side, is the red, and the right side is the black wire. So red, black, like that. And then you have this little capacitor, and you see the gray stripe. Now I want to say something about these capacitors. When you're working on these cameras and you start digging into where the capacitors are, you got to really take precaution. Wear some kind of rubber gloves or something, because this thing will shock you. And if you ever been shocked by like a stun gun, this is what's in those stun guns, and this thing here will give you quite a kick. It says here it's how many volts is this thing? 330 volt. So if this thing is fully charged, it will, you know, it's not going to knock you to the ground or anything, but it will shock you where your arm is just going to want to sling it across the room, because that's happened to me. So here's this little cable, and this thing solders on just like that. You notice the gray is the negative. It solders on that little cable like this. And let me make sure I get that on film there, or camera. So it goes like that, and so you have to unsolder that. So there's that cable. Oh, there's one more solder point that I almost forgot. Right here on this side, there's an antenna. And that, let's see, this cable's broken, so I'll have to show you with, see, the little pieces broken. So here's the new cable. So your capacitor solders, goes like that with the stripe of the negative this way, and then there's those little points there, red, black. And then this little cable right here, you notice the little solder points on this end. It comes around the side here and solders right there. You see those little solder points on that antenna? So it did a flip around once it gets around there and solders on that end. So that's just some good information. So another thing I noticed about the M5 compared to the M4 is this motherboard. Now the M4 plugged in, the motherboard had a plug on the back that plugged into this motherboard, but this one doesn't. So this one has this cable here at the top, and these 2 cables down here, and then you have these little clips over here. It's kind of tucked in. Once it's in there, it's kind of tucked in like this down here, and there's 2 little clips right here. There's one right here and one over here, and you kind of got to push those out of the way. You really don't have to remove this cable if you just want to remove them. You know, I really don't know how that cable there comes apart yet, but I didn't touch it. So you just more or less get this one, you kind of got to flip it up here, and then once it gets loose, flip it out of those bottom ones, and then you can just flip it out of the way. That's how I did it. And then to get the lens out, of course, you have to unplug the CCD from the back of this motherboard. And then when you're pushing the lens out, you got to watch this cable here because it wants to snag on things. So you just kind of push this one out of the way and start pushing the lens up. And this board here is going to be the way. Now this one ripped, and if you watch that M4 video, lens replacement video that I did, I talk about this little board. When you pull it up, you don't want to pull it too much because this little cable right here is going behind over here on this antenna. So you just want to barely pick it up and then move the lens up, and then you have to, on the M4, you have to loosen this motherboard and kind of get it past it and then wiggle it out. Well, this one, since you can just move this motherboard, it comes out. It does get kind of snagged, you know, where you kind of tilt it a little bit and tilt it back and forth, and then it comes on out. So this motherboard, just like the M4, is going to be in the way when you're removing the lens. So you're just going to pick it up a little bit, watch these cables over here, and then get it on out. So still some good information here on this camera. So I got this, you know, it is a little bit different than the M4, but that's really about it. Just the motherboard there. Some things will mount a little different here and there. This thing's probably different, or maybe it could be the same, because not too sure. Can't remember how the M4 was, but I know this motherboard here on the M4 had a plug on the back, and that just plugged right into this board. And of course, when you're taking the lens out, you got to remove this cable, and that plugs in right here. So once you remove this motherboard, you can unplug this, kind of pick this little board up here a little bit, get these cables, make sure they're not getting snagged on anything, get all these out of the way, and just start pushing the lens out. Just be real slow and real careful, and then you can replace your lens. I'm sure if you're going to dive into something like this, you're going to know how to get the covers off and all that stuff. Or you could probably watch the M4 video, because I think the M4 is pretty much like this one on the outside. So that's how to remove this cable. Or if you have to remove this little eye viewer thing, if you have to replace that, you pretty much just take the camera apart. You don't have to really remove the lens, I don't think. I'm not sure if that thing will, maybe you do have to remove the lens, because I think that yeah, it goes over this part right here. So you still do have to remove the lens just to replace this part. So that's not good. So yeah, pretty similar to the M4. Little changes in this motherboard here, and let's see what else. Oh, this little piece of tape. This little piece of tape. This goes over the capacitor. Once it's soldered on there, they have it covering the little solder points. You want to save this, and once you solder that back on, or you want to just put this little piece of tape back on there, it's good to keep that just like it was, so you don't want to accidentally touch that thing. I want to say again, these little solder points on this, you don't want to touch it, and especially if it has a full charge. And that's why I like to, when I get a camera, I always tell the people before they send it, remove the battery, let it discharge, you know, a couple days, and then once it's in the mail discharging, then by the time I get it, it should be, you know, pretty much discharged at that time. So that's how to remove the eye view. You still have to remove the whole lens, but it's a little bit easier, I would say, than the M4, because you don't have to unplug that motherboard here. It just has two little clips here that pops out of the way, these two little cables. You remove your CCD cable from the back of this motherboard. Then you start pushing the lens out, and you just watch these cables over here. And of course you have to move all these cables, get them unstuck, because they got on the back side of this cable here is stick 'em, and they're sticking right here. If you can see that, stick 'em right here on this cable. And you got to be real careful when you unstick this, because this it's kind of tricky, because this cable has got sticking stuff right here, and it's stuck on the side of the lens, and then this one is stuck on top of that other one. So if you start pulling on this one, you could rip it right here. So you gotta get this one loose first under here, stick your little toothpick under there, get that, stick them off the lens, and then start going like this, and then you can remove that, and just then while that's in there, it'll still be, you know, you can kind of get it out of the way like this, then start folding this thing back, but don't go too far, because you'll rip this little cable right here. Like that one probably got ripped. So that's this cable right here, this little one that goes to that antenna on the side, and I talk about that on the M4 video. So still some good information on the M5 here, so I thought I'd make a real quick video. I just took a couple minutes here to start working on it, and so I got this little board, this cable here unsoldered, and now I can go ahead and put this one on there, put all this back together, get that out of the way, and once I clean the CCD on this camera and get it swapped to the other lens, I can go ahead and throw the lens on, and then I can start working on the LCD. So I'm gonna wrap this one up for here, and see if I can finish this thing. I'm gonna probably work on it for a little bit more, and then I gotta go. So I'm out for this one. All right.